Hello and welcome back to another live stream. So, I hope everyone is doing well. For the third time in a row, I did not turn the volume off on the other stream. So what's the saying? Old habits die hard. Um, so I hope everyone's doing well. The reason I am a bit orange is because the reason I usually have these in the morning, or at least the morning for me, is because like it's summer in the UK now, and obviously it doesn't get insanely hot here. You know, it's not like somewhere near the equator, or even mainland Europe for that matter. But it does get a bit toasty, and yeah, the room I'm in heats up quite a lot. So usually have them in the morning. I think I've already explained this on stream actually, but I usually have them in the morning, so the sun hasn't risen. It's still a bit cooler. Um, but I've been doing that for a while, so I thought it'd be nice for other people to have it later in the day, so that people in different time zones can tune in and stuff. So this one's in the afternoon, and I've got the curtains drawn so the light doesn't come in. The sun, not as much of the heat comes in, so it turns me a bit yellow or orange. But anyway, that is a bit of useless information for you. So, what have we got going today? So, this one is a follow up to also hello Medcos. Thanks for dropping in the chat. Everyone else watching, definitely if you'd like to say hello in the chat, we can see who's here. And yeah, so this stream, so I did one before, which was just reacting to general antinatalist content on from YouTube and stuff, because I think there's a lot of decent content out there, and a lot of it is interesting to discuss, but there's also some decent content out there that deserves appreciation. And whilst I am by no means a big channel or anything like that, if I'm going to do a live stream reacting to antinatalist content, might as well include some that deserves more appreciation than it gets. Anyway, so Charlatan and JE are in the chat as well. Hello both. And yeah, so did one last time. I really enjoyed that, just getting a bit of variety. So again, we're doing the same thing. I basically got, I think probably this will be an ongoing thing, so we'll probably have loads of these live streams of like reacting to random content related to antinatalism. And I've just got an ongoing playlist that I add stuff to as and when I come across it, and I'm like, oh, that'd be interesting, whack it in there. So you've got a playlist for today. Don't know if we'll get through all of it. In fact, we definitely won't, so obviously we'll be doing more streams. But we've got the leftovers from last time. I sent out a form again, so we've got some new additions from the form submissions. And I've I've also added some in. Now, I will admit, there is one video in here which I don't know if it's actually about antinatalism, but it's by a big YouTuber, and it's about the Childfree movement. So I'm sure there will be references, if not by name, to antinatalism. So I thought that would be interesting. So we'll have a look at that. Queen Nihad is in the chat as well. Hey, Queen Nihad. And I don't know if there's anything else to go over before we start, to be honest. Yeah, I guess the only other thing I would say is that there is a bunch of content out there that is really like antinatalist content out there that is really interesting and worth watching, but it's not going to feature in these live streams because like in these we need to be watching videos that are like 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes long. But that a lot of the content out there is 45 minutes, like half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, if not longer. So yeah, there's going to be a lot that we're not going to be able to watch on here. So anyway, JE apparently added a bunch of videos in the form late last night. I actually saw that. So the form only had a few submissions, and then I checked it this morning, and it had shot up by about 10. So I don't know if that was all you, JE, but you definitely played into it. And we should. So what I've done is I tried to get like a mixture of things, right? So I've ordered the playlist in a specific way that I want to go through, and I can't actually remember which ones were added via the form and which ones weren't. So we may get to we may get some of yours may be in the order of the playlist, JE, that we'll get to. If not, then there will be more streams. Farhan is in the chat. Hey, Farhan. And cool. Okay, I don't think there's anything else. The only other thing I will say before we start is that for the next 2 weeks, I would say for the next 2 weeks, there's going to be slightly less content. I've got some stuff scheduled coming up, but there's going to be slightly less content because I'm away for a week. And because I'm away for a week, I'm busy the week before. Like this coming week, I'm a bit busy because, I got to tie stuff up at work, tie other stuff up before I go away for a week. So, yeah, it's going to be slightly less big. But when I come back from being away for a week, I've got a bunch of stuff lined up to record, which I think will be really interesting. Some discussion, some interviews. It's going to be really good. So we've got some exciting stuff coming up. Farhan is just saying in the chat that they couldn't open up the form because they didn't have a secure connection. I don't think that's anything to do with the form. I think that's something to do with your internet connection. So I won't be able to help with that. I'm pretty sure it's nothing to do with the form because other people have been able to make submissions. And cool. And I'm not sure how you say it, but ST is in the chat as well. Hey, ST. Cool. Let's get into the first one then, shall we? So let me switch screens. So this first one, let me just collapse that. So this first one, again, because of the way I've done the screen so that it works, it's not going to show you all of it, but it's another one by this Daniel Mackler guy. He was quite popular last time, and I find him quite interesting as well. I've watched actually. He's got a video on a whole range of things, and I've watched quite a few of his videos. It's just him speaking to camera. I'm not even sure much of it is scripted as well, to be honest. But he seems like an interesting guy. And yeah, I thought this might be I haven't actually watched this one. I was saving it for this stream. But yeah, let's get into it. So this one is Daniel Mackler on why is it a bad idea to have kids. So let's see what he's got to say.
Why is it a bad idea to have kids?
And I have set up, just before we start, and anyone puts in the chat, I've set up all the audio. It should be perfectly fine. It's exactly the same as it has been in the last couple of streams, and the audio was fine. So hopefully it's okay. But if it's bad for anyone, there's not really much I can do because I've fine-tuned everything on my end.
This subject comes up often in my life. I'm still at an age where my peers are having children, and I see people all around me having children, and I know tons of people who have had kids, and I was a kid once, and I think kids are beautiful. But I think it's a very bad idea to have kids, especially nowadays.
Well, it's interesting here because, so straight off the mark, he's set up the video in a way where the viewer understands that he does not dislike kids in any way, which obviously, there are plenty of antinatalists who do, but there are plenty of people who do, right? Just generally. So it's not something inherent in antinatalism. In fact, antinatalists can love kids, love their company, find them funny, all of this sort of stuff. But still hold a position that it's better not to create people because antinatalism isn't about not creating kids. It's about not creating people. Even if we just popped into existence as fully grown adults, there would still be the same ethical issues, right? So, but I've spoken about that before. But yeah, I think it's good he sets it up that way, and it makes me think then that um, the reasons he's going to talk about are going to be philanthropic. They're going to be about protecting the child from ever coming into existence.
In this modern era. And I'm going to give my reasons. The first reason is simple. The world is massively crowded with people. Part of what I've been doing the last 5 years, and I did it a lot when I was in my early 20s too, was travel all around the world. I've never been to South America, but I've been to every other continent. I've been to tons of different countries. I've seen lots of different environments. And everywhere I've been, I've seen there are simply too many people. It's just, we use too many resources. We plant things that destroy natural ecologies. We take up space that other animals and plants should be having. We cut down forests. Okay, yes, humanity could certainly be living a lot more wisely and taking up a lot fewer resources. But 7 billion of us, come on. This is like ludicrous. If people can't see this, and a lot of people can't, it's a bit shocking to me. So that's the first part. The world is just too crowded. So I see mature people should not be having children. Yes, I know there's people who say the most mature people should be having children. They should be the one who pass on their genes, and et cetera, et cetera.
Just a few more people have jumped in the chat, so I'll just say hey. So Dio has jumped in the chat, and thanks Dio as well. Triumvirat, I don't know if I'm saying your name right, but welcome as well. Yeah, so it looks like he's going for the overpopulation thing, right? Which I think the overpopulation thing, while it's not antinatalism, well, let's see what the rest of what he has to say is before I say anything.
But that, and also the ones who raise the children the best. But I don't see it that way. I say, yes, of course, children deserve the best possible, most mature parents. But I think at this point, anybody who's really mature is going to realize that this is not the time to be having children. People, yes, there's always going to be people out there, I believe, who are going to be having children. I don't encourage it. I don't think it's a good idea. But I say they're going to be the ones who are creating the next generation. So I don't worry about humanity going extinct. Quite the opposite. We're not going to go extinct through lack of breeding. We're going to go extinct through overbreeding. So the first thing, yes, the world is hyper-crowded.
That's interesting. He didn't really pose any sort of opposition or sound like he was opposed to human extinction, per se, which is interesting. Yeah. This guy, I might reach out to him, but this guy could actually be low key, very low hanging fruit for antinatalism.
The second part is a little bit more subtle. And what I've seen is that when people have children, they basically don't grow in the same way. It takes a huge amount of energy to raise a child. I think a lot of people who have children have never really spent that much time around children, especially young children and babies, and they have a sort of fantasy about it. And
that's definitely true. People have this sort of rose-tinted view when it comes to procreation in many ways about how it's going to be, raising the kid, but also what they're responsible for, how their kid's life is going to turn out. All of these sorts of things, people selectively imagine the best, or the top 10%, top 20% of outcomes. But by definition, most people that you create are not going to end up like that. And a lot of them are going to end up in the bottom 10, 20%. So it's good that more people other than antinatalists are actually aware of this and talking about it, because I think sometimes when antinatalists talk about things like this, we are labeled as, because we hold like a strong ethical view on it, we're just sidelined as doomers and stuff like that, depressives, which I think is silly. But this guy is someone who talks on a whole range of topics, is clearly very intelligent, very well educated, the sort of person that people will listen to and take seriously. I think that's my perception anyway. And so it's good that people like this hold this view, which I think is a lot more realistic than the average person.
One of the first things that I see is when people have children, their growth process goes. They're working on their own childhoods and they're resolving their traumas and they're grieving. Takes a nosedive. And yes, I know a lot of parents who say having children helped me really understand my childhood better and help me get in touch with a lot of stuff and be a stronger person. But to me, that's not fair. Why should having a child provoke that? That's like using a kid for something that a person really should be doing internally motivated from within themselves, not because of a relationship.
Oh, this guy is so like on the verge of antinatalism. Like he actually understands that when you create someone, you're creating a fully separate person from you who has their own needs, desires, should not be used as some sort of tool for you to achieve your personal aims. Oh, I want self-growth, I'm going to pump out another human. Like it's good he hasn't fallen into the trap of thinking about kids in the same way that many, even most people will. And Triumvirat in the chat is asking what a low-key antinatalist is. I think JE was talking about about his basically low-key means I mean, technically, low key means like under the radar. Like someone, if someone is low key. Wait, am I? Is the stream still going? Can someone just confirm in the chat if? Yeah. Okay. If someone could just confirm in the chat that the stream is still up, because I'm just getting some stuff that's suggesting to me. Yeah, okay, cool. That was weird. I was just getting some stuff suggesting to me that it had just dropped out for some reason. Yeah, basically, if someone's a low-key something, it basically means that, like, either they're very close to it or they are it, but they're not open about it, basically. Yeah.
So the main thing is that when I see people have children, their growth process is largely stunted. And I think the ultimate time
And hey, John, as well. Nice to see you here.
to really do inner healing is when we are alone, when we're single, when we're spending a lot of time with ourselves and really getting in touch with our feelings, not being obliged and responsible to other people, and not having to devote so much of our mental and physical energy to someone else. Also, you can sleep a lot better when you don't have kids. There's a lot of things that really improve the growth process for someone who really wants to do the deep inner work when they don't have children.
Yeah, and almost like, to me, I mean, it's a complicated one, but to me, if someone is wanting to grow up as a person and develop and, go through this journey of self-actualization or self-growth or self-development, to say that I want to do all that stuff, and to do that, I'm just going to create someone else and use them to solve my problems. It just, to me, removing all of the ethical issues, it just seems like such a cheap way out. Like, surely, if you are, like, I'm not sure how to articulate it, but I mean, maybe it isn't a cheap way out, because if you remove all the ethical side, then raising a child is very difficult. But I don't know. I'll have to think about that a bit more.
Then there's one other part, and this is the third part, is that children deserve the best possible parents. They deserve parents who have done really all of their inner work. Because when parents don't do their inner work, when people don't do their inner work, even a little bit of their inner work and they have power, especially full power like parents have over children, they will act out their issues on their children. And even parents who are considered the best parents, they do. And a lot of times they do it the worst, because a lot of times the people who consider themselves the best parents are actually the most arrogant. And arrogant people have a very easy time acting out their traumas on someone else because they don't even acknowledge they're doing it to themselves. So, to me, the real goal of life is to grow and to not pass on our traumas. There's enough trauma in the world. We've all had enough traumas done to us. So why participate?
Yeah, amen to that. I think like people don't realize like how much trauma defines the like the behavior people like if you look at the sum total of all the behavior that humans express, so much of it seems to me to be driven by trauma.
In that by doing it to other people.
And so much of it is just passed on from parents to children.
So for me, again, it comes down to three things. One, the world is really crowded. There's too many of us, too few resources, and there is nature that we're destroying. So number one reason not to have kids. Number two reason, it's a lot harder to do our inner growth when we're responsible for someone else's life, especially a baby or a child, or more than one baby and child. So to do ourselves a favor, to do what we need to do to really grow and heal and become more mature, better not to have kids. The third reason is children deserve perfect parents. Children deserve parents who have already done their inner work and are already healed, not parents who are partway there.
100%. If you're going to create someone, you better fucking make sure that you are the most suited person to do that. Like, again, throat clearing, you shouldn't be doing it anyway. But if someone is going to be doing it, they should 100% be prepared for that. So many people do it on like like either autopilot or they wing it. And like if you don't have the capacity in your skills or capacities or resources to give your kid the best shot possible, and that's not the best shot possible that you're capable of, but the best shot possible overall, then people need to think like twice about doing this stuff. Like people feel so entitled, like they can be in the shittiest situation and think, yeah, well, I can just do it because I'm entitled to do that. I'm entitled to create someone. We'll just figure out the issues afterwards. It's like, no, you're literally dealing with a whole other independent human. Not independent in terms of they can look after themselves, because kids can't, but independent in terms of they are separate from you. Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy people's approach to this sort of stuff.
Me, I'm partway there, and I don't know anybody who is not partway there. And I think children deserve better. So I think the thing we really need to do is change ourselves, change our whole culture, change our whole society, build a society around healing trauma, and then society will leap forward. I think people will want to have a lot less children, and then I think it'll be a lot easier to grow, and maybe then it'll be appropriate for people who are more mature to have children.
Cool. That was the first one. So that was another Daniel Mackler.
Do you think you're...
So, yeah, I enjoyed that. I think that guy is like very intelligent. He's obviously very experienced when it comes to understanding people's psychology and stuff. So this next one is more of like a popular culture one. So this one has got, I don't know if you can see that, but you can't see, but it's got 500,000 views, just over. So this guy is a big YouTuber. He's called Jen. I don't know if he's called Jen, but like the channel's called Jen. And it's got quite a lot of subscribers. I can't actually see at the moment because I've cropped the thing. But basically what this guy does is he goes out on the street, asks people questions that are relevant to current socio-political discourse in America, tends to be, and basically ask people their opinion on it, usually gets a decent spread, and then narrativizes that and turns it into what he calls, what does he call it? Something journalism. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, so he's done one here, like, is the child-free movement going too far? And I thought, because it's a big channel, um, it's interesting to hear like a wide variety of opinions, which will be encapsulated in this, and maybe antinatalism will even get mentioned. I doubt by name, to be honest, unless he randomly happens to talk to one on the street. But I doubt that. But yeah, let's see.
Do you think you'll regret it if you never had kids?
No, I am not sure if I want this environment to my kids.
The idea of being pregnant just does not appeal to me.
Hang on, let me just move myself so that fuck, wrong one. Let me move myself so that you guys can see the captions. I'll make myself smaller. I'll be up here. Okay, hopefully that's better. Yeah, I think that's better. Okay, cool. Let's continue.
Someone else is paying for the kids.
Not to mention easy access to birth control.
People are dying.
My bloodline ends with me.
America has
Oh, that's quite funny. So, I don't know how many of you know David Rams. He's like a vegan YouTuber. Anyway, so he was saying to me, I've spoken to him about antinatalism quite a lot, and he was saying to me that he thinks the coolest thing you could do is, instead of saying that you won't have kids, is to stare someone in the eye and say, my bloodline ends with me. Because you're saying the same thing, but it's just a lot cooler. And that woman in the clip just did it there, which I think that's quite funny. I don't know if that's where he got it from. Or
declining birth rates. Why do you think this is happening? Because today there's two schools of thought.
The number of humans on Earth needs to go down, or it will be our downfall.
The planet cannot support more people.
Can our planet even sustain nearly 8 billion now and 10 billion by 2050?
How are we going to feed everybody, get water to everybody, provide power to everybody? How are we going to do this?
Or are we focusing on the wrong problem?
This is the most commonly misunderstood situation. What we face is population collapse.
The size of family shrinks precipitous, like below replacement. There's going to be a terrible shortage of young people.
And so are we headed towards decline and even worse, extinction?
yeah, honestly, I can't like remove, if you just remove antinatalism for a minute and talk about demographics. I actually can't tell if the declining birth rates that are being seen in the West and more economically developed countries, that countries that are now developing to getting to that point, you know, countries like Nigeria and a range of other countries who still have relatively high birth rates, but will get to the point that we are at, which will eventually, like, the population is still going to go up for, I'm not sure how long. I think it's predicted like quite a few more decades, and then it's gonna start coming down. But once we get to the point where the population does decrease, I actually can't figure out if that is going to be a good thing in terms of being able to maintain the standard of living that most people will have become acclimatized to in developed countries now. So just forgetting antinatalism for a minute, just take your antinatalist hat off. Like, imagine you've never heard of it, and you're just thinking about, okay, so we're living on Earth. We've developed a generally decent standard of living in, the economically developed countries today. You know, countries like Japan, South Korea, the US, the UK, well, Europe generally, kind of, a range of countries. We have access to modern medicine, by and large. You know, we have coolers, heaters, we have, decent housing. Obviously, this is on average. There are people within all these countries that it's not going to be the case of, but you get my point. This general decent standard of living that many people have been able to attain. That obviously rests on a wider system, a supply chain, a global supply chain. It rests on other people being able to go to work and produce all these things that we use and maintain the things that we use. If the population starts to decline, will that standard of living have to be sacrificed? Will we have to go back to something more, not primitive, because that suggests we're going way far back, but not as advanced as we are now? Or not, because it could be that a population decline would lead to that if the our capacities were not to change, but they probably will change, right? Like, we're going to have AI, but who knows if that's going to be positive or negative in terms of standard of living. So to me, it seems so uncertain at the moment. I've no idea. Like, all these people predicting the future about, we need the population to go down, otherwise we're not going to be able to sustain our standard of living, or the population cannot go down, otherwise we're not going to be able to sustain our standard of living. Like, I'm not actually sure which one of these is true. It's such a complicated topic. It's one I find really interesting, which is why I did the birth gaps live stream a few live streams ago. But yeah, obviously it becomes a different question when you bring antinatalism into it. It becomes a very different conversation. But a couple of people have said in the chat. So of course, Elon and Jordan are going to be in there. Yeah, of course, yeah. Well, they're probably the most famous people to be honking that horn, I think, probably, right? Yeah, Jordan Peterson talking about children like resources. Yeah, who's like, there was a time when he said some sensible stuff, but like the stuff I've seen of him now, he's just taken such a nosedive. Like, he's just become captured by his audience, and he just throws red meat to his base. That's all he does now, from what I can see. Fahan asks, do you think people want a son or a daughter, or do they just want kids? Well, I think by and large, people who want kids just want kids, but obviously everyone will have their own preference. Everyone has a slight preference. But I don't know. I've no idea, to be honest. It would depend on the person completely. Cool. And Triumvirat is, I'm just going to call you Trium from now on. The next generation will be the last anyway. At least that's quite likely if humanity survives the next few decades. Probably look more like a horrible dystopia. I guess maybe you're talking about sort of like climate change, maybe AI as well, right? Could very well be the case, like the future is super uncertain.
So I'm out here today, and the question I'm asking is, do you want kids?
I have kids, but if I didn't have a kid, I'd still want a kid. The only way we're gonna survive is to embrace being human. Just because we can do something, it doesn't mean we should.
I already have kids.
Have you?
What? I mean, I know he's done editing, but what is she on about there? She's just jumping all over the place.
Always wanted kids when you were growing up?
Yes.
Would you want your kids to have kids?
If it's right for them.
By the time I'm 35, I'll be old enough to kind of start being more mature about that point.
Do you know how many kids you want?
We'll do one adopted, one natural birth. The first one I want to adopt to skip the first 5
Like
years.
a trial run?
Yeah, trial run. Exactly.
Return it if you don't like it.
100%.
Oh, I don't know. That's a lot of money that I wouldn't be spending on myself.
I don't think I'm equipped to raise a child through all the, that things I can hardly deal with myself.
I like to go out a lot. I can only take care of one person.
I'm a musician, and so it's really hard for me to even think about caring for others at this time.
Do you eventually want to have kids at some age?
Maybe if someone else is paying for the kids.
But it's your kid.
I need to do some healing before I hard any of those things I've gone through on another little human. It's not that
See, she's the sort of person that Daniel Mackler was talking about, like having to heal yourself before you put yourself in a situation where you're responsible for someone else.
Don't want kids. I'm a 39-year-old woman, and at this point in my life, there's just still work I need to do, and it's just not really maybe in my cards.
Yeah, I was going to say also, to be honest, like once she's got to 39, if she's still got to the point where she's umming and ahhing, it's probably not going to happen, because like 39's too old. You really need to have made this decision like in your 20s, like early 30s.
You feel
like obviously it can happen, but it's just much less likely. And I believe that the older woman gets as well, like if they're in their sort of, if they're knocking 40 and then into their early 40s, I believe the chance that the child has complications rises as well.
More free not having kids?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can travel whenever I want. I can spend my money all on me.
In my early 20s, I wanted kids really badly, but that was before I started having so much fun.
What's like a typical weekend look like for you?
Like go to a music festival or like an EDM or house show.
Yeah, them kids, right? Do you want kids?
I think it's very selfish. Looking at the world and how it is right now, global warming and all that kind of stuff, I am not sure if I want this environment to my kids.
The climate, like climate change and everything, that has obviously gotten worse over our generation. So the problems we're facing nowadays aren't really the same that people were facing decades ago.
Because for the first time in history, people are questioning if it's even morally okay to have children.
Climate change is a big factor in why she's not having children.
We're not sure that we're going to have kids because we don't want to bring our kids into a world like this.
It is not okay to have children.
The lives of children are going to be very difficult.
And it's impacting everyone. The number of babies being born is inching closer and closer to 2.1 per woman, which is the replacement number that prevents the population from shrinking.
For the first time ever, there are more women without children at 30 than there are women with children.
So in short, people ain't having sex. And with some countries already facing the consequences, we must...
Yeah, I've heard this. I don't know too much about it, but I've heard that the amount of sex people having has dropped off as well.
Question the social implications of an increasingly isolated society. But is this all legit or just fear-mongering? Is the world even heading towards collapse or overpopulation, or both at the same time? And a matter of fact, do I even see myself starting a family? Like, I deadass still live out of a fucking suitcase. I guess we don't see. And starting with America. America has declining birth rates.
Oh, that's quite cool. So I've watched a couple of his videos before, and he's always just been in America, but it sounds... by what he just said, that he'll be in a few other countries maybe.
What do you think this is happening?
In our parents' generation, most people got married younger, with women being caretaker, like cooking, watching your children, like being a stay-at-home mom, like that was your job. Nowadays, it's like women like to work. To be a stay-at-home mom, like you have to have money.
Honestly, everything was cheaper back then. You could get a house for much cheaper. Everything was just more affordable.
It's very true. Things were more affordable. Like, one example that like is specifically impacting me at the moment is like the housing market in the UK, and I'm sure it's the case in other places as well. Like it used to be the case that to buy a house it would only be like 2 or 3 times your income. Now it's like 11 times, so it's just it's mad. So it's like it's harder for young people. And I say young people because those are the ones who are going to be having kids, right? So it's harder for young people to actually get themselves sorted out, let alone get someone else sorted out. But also it's just going to, even if they get themselves sorted out, it's going to be more expensive to bring someone into the world, which is one of the main reasons that birth rates have dropped. So I've used it loads of times before. I've shown it on live streams. Our World in Data, they have a page on fertility rates. They talk about the 3 main causes of why fertility rates tend to drop, or like have dropped. The average global fertility rate, and it's dropped for 3 reasons: decreased infant mortality, raising a kid is more expensive, and women have it's called female empowerment or emancipation, but under that it's female education, entering the workforce, etc., access to contraception. So that's more of an umbrella one that encompasses a few different things. Yeah, I mean, it being more expensive to raise a kid is a function of a few different things. Like, as a country develops generally, it's going to be more expensive to raise a kid because the standard of living that people require or expect increases, right? So now, if you let's say you wanted to raise a kid, even 30 years ago, they would not be getting a smartphone. One, because they didn't even exist, but like providing a child with a bit of technology that's very advanced that they carry around everywhere was just not the norm. Whereas now, it's the norm for a kid to have a smartphone. Like it would be odd in many places for a kid not to have a smartphone, right? So it's an additional cost. All these things rack up over time. And Aditya's in the chat. Aditya's asking if I'm assuming you mean I'm taking suggestions. I put out a form ahead of time, and people could send their suggestions then. If you want to send in a suggestion for the next stream, whenever I schedule it, I'll put out another form, and you can send it there.
But also, I feel like a lot of people in this generation are trying to be successful on their own and creating these startups, which you really don't have time to take care of a baby.
The declining of birth rates is people planning more their lives, their future, and their family life.
Why do you think this is happening to our country?
People are dying. I don't know. I went to dark places, I'm sorry. But I mean, like, I think people are maybe more career focused. Like, people are getting kids when they're older.
People are realizing, like, I have a future to have before I even have a family. I'm saving till I actually finish my goal, and then I'll have kids after that. You know, be able to be financially stable enough to where my family is not suffering.
It's interesting too because it's not just America, but a lot of developed nations. Do you think then this is a sign of societal decline?
Absolutely, and we should be very alarmed.
Definitely, and good for us. I think some destruction is necessary for like things to grow into new places.
There's a lot of people who just want to go out and have fun, experience their lives. Parents will say, hey, don't have kids at my age. Go out and have fun.
In order to provide a good life to your kids, it's expensive nowadays.
Do you think in America we're prioritizing more about getting the bag rather than building like a strong family unit?
For some people, you got to get the bag first to build a strong family unit. For what some people want for their family, like, you got to be making money to have that.
It seems like the cost of having kids is a big factor. But hasn't this always been the case even during our parents' generation? Why do you think this is happening where my generation, like Gen Z and millennials, are having kids
Hey, Rupert is in the chat.
a lot later in life?
People are preferring to live their own lives, some selfish lives, with no kids, with no problems, with...
People, I hear this all the time. People suggest that if you want to live your own life, it's selfish. Like, how? Like, it would be selfish to create someone and then continue just to live your own life and not provide for them, sure. But if you don't create anyone, like, there's no one for you to need to take care of. So why is it selfish just to, like, make your own way through life? Like, none of us asked to be here. We just got put here. Now we've got to navigate life. Why is it selfish just to navigate your life and try and have a good time while you're here?
More money to spend with them.
And Rupert's saying hi from Leeds as well. We've got a fellow Brit. Hey from London.
I think that you're exposed to a lot more of what's going on.
Having kids means taking away from my freedom. What would you say to that as someone who's been a mother?
Oh, it definitely takes away from your freedom.
So did you ever regret it during that process?
No, I found it difficult at times. And sometimes, you know, you would daydream and like wonder like, ooh, what would life be like? But then there's like your kid, man. Like I have massive love for my girls.
So for them, it's like being in person, or is like us, like social media, like Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We can connect more easily.
Do you think we're more connected though?
I think that maybe just like access to technology has just shown us like how much more there is out there.
And look, it seems paradoxical, but is this infinite access to potential options and technology the direct contributor to our falling birth rates?
Oh, that's interesting. So I think what he's suggesting there is that back in the day when people's horizons were narrower, so, for example, you were born in a small town or a small village. There was a single track sort of mindset. Everyone just thought, this is the lot I have in life. You have a kid, that's part of life, whatever. But what she was saying, and maybe what he's suggesting now, is that given the fact that we have technology that makes us aware of so many other things that are happening around the world and so many other things that we could be doing, the choice of procreating and going down that line seems to be just one option in a plethora of choices that you can, paths you can go down in your life. Whereas before, maybe your horizons were narrower, so it didn't seem like there were as many paths. That's quite interesting, actually. I hadn't thought of that.
When you're single, everyone's always like, hey, get on a dating app.
What's my #1 opening line on Tinder?
With a click of a button, dating apps presents you a pool of potential partners with an algorithm built to keep you addicted to the promise of finding the one.
I just feel like that she's the one, you know what I'm saying? I FaceTime her a lot. Her personality really matched who I am.
Even with the seemingly equal and never before seen opportunity to find love while taking a shit, the outcomes have been far from equal. What they found with the Tinder economy is that the bottom 80% of men in terms of attractiveness are competing for the bottom 22% of women, and the top 78% of women are competing for the top 20% of men. And so for those at the top with options, there's a paradox of choice in dating where people are always searching to avoid committing to one person in fear of losing out on someone even better out there. Whereas for most men, it's a different reality.
Yeah, I've got to say, like modern dating seems fucked. At least in like London and the UK. Does does not seem like the best dating market that you'd want to be in.
For the last decade, the number of men reporting no sex in the last year has tripled.
Compared to past generations who were getting jobs, having sex, getting married, and then having kids earlier, almost 1/3 of men under 30 today haven't had sex in the last year or haven't had sex at all. And with the rise of AI, not only is there genuine fear that automation will start replacing people's jobs, from truck drivers to even lawyers, it may even start replacing human companionship.
The whole point of a robot is that you can have a relationship with it.
I stopped seeing her as an it, and more as not a person, of course, but something more.
And so are we raising a generation of men who are risk averse and not...
He only said not a person, of course, because he knew it would come off weird. Like, he definitely sees her as a person.
Developing the competencies required for adult responsibilities like starting a family.
I saw you.
It's interesting. It's actually, I went to see a double bill of the Blade Runner films recently. So the original from way back in the day and the 2049 from a couple of years ago. And in the second one, in Blade Runner 2049, it actually explores... well, it's not human AI relationships, because to be fair, they're actually both technically like AI. But basically, if you haven't seen Blade Runner 1, in the second one, the main character is he's not human, but and that's not spoilers, that's explained right at the start of the film. He's not human, but you could be very easily forgiven for thinking that he's human. So for all intents and purposes, he's basically human. And he has like this AI simulation girlfriend. It's quite interesting how they explore like their relationships. Yeah, exactly, replicants. But I didn't want to use the word because anyone who's not seen it wouldn't know what I meant. But yeah, replicants.
Thought you were, and I was wondering if I could get your. No, forget it. Yeah.
Because are we at a point where adolescence is becoming an extension of childhood rather than the beginning of adulthood? Shut up, bro. Come on, I'm grown. And so it's important to consider that for every action, there's always an equal and opposite reaction. And so how is all this impacting women and ultimately the future of our population? Do you think people look down on being a mom today? The reason why I asked this is because you even prefaced this saying that you want to be a stay-at-home mom. Like, that's like a bad thing.
To be a stay-at-home mom, like, you have to have money. Unless your one partner is able to pull for the both of you and your family, like, you cannot be a stay-at-home mom.
I think
Yeah, usually, like back in the day, a family used to be able to live off the average job, one income for the whole family, at least in the UK. You would not be able to do that now.
A lot of people like glamorize motherhood, but then I think a lot of people have started dissing people who are mothers or who embrace motherhood. I don't know, I've been seeing like a lot of TikToks of people who, once they have children, it causes like stress in the marriage.
I don't know if you are on TikTok, but there's a whole thing with like the girl with like the list of like reasons why you should not have kids.
And this TikTok list by unique...
TikTok is fucking cancer. I'm not on TikTok. People occasionally send me TikTok videos and I watch them in the web browser, but yeah, I've never had an account or anything like that. It just seems like a cesspool. But let's see what this is.
Thoughts is a compilation of over 350 reasons to never have a child. She compiles TikToks from various accounts and adds them to her list of reasons, ranging from baby parasite to uterine trauma. And based on its engagements, the videos have become pretty damn popular. But it does make you think, does it reflect the popular trend nowadays to bash pregnancies and to encourage women to reject motherhood?
I've also seen like a lot of people in like the public space that choose to not have kids, so it's kind of like I have a role model of women who don't want the same outcome of their life that has just been kind of just like a generational thing.
We learn a lot of things nowadays based off like social media, what people will decide to share.
Having children isn't always like the best option for everyone, and I think people are just starting to realize that.
And in developed countries...
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just people making others aware of the risks and the implications and the consequences of creating someone, right? But it is valid to say that some of it will also be demonization. And I don't think people should be going out there demonizing people, even if you disagree with something strongly. Just from an effectiveness point of view, I'm not sure it's going to be effective. But yeah, definitely, it's definitely worth. I mean, I don't know this TikTok account that he's showcasing here, but like, if she is just literally cataloging examples of what can happen if you procreate, like, I see no issue with that. Oh, I missed a tip. So I won't say who they are, but I know them. So thanks, man, for tipping and donating. You know who you are. But they say, great stream, bro. Thanks for introducing me to rational antinatalism. No worries. And I'm glad you found it, and you're enjoying the stream as well. And I hope you're doing as well too, man. And I will speak to you on WhatsApp as usual. And I hope the chess is going well as well. But cool, let's continue.
With greater access to education and birth control, there tend to be lower fertility and birth rates. And along with it, a shift where women now have the opportunity to prioritize their own careers and goals, unlike in underdeveloped countries where family and children are the traditional focus. And with that, it made me consider another perspective. Do you feel like the societal pressure to have kids is unfair?
I live in the LA bubble where a lot of people are doing similar things to what I'm doing. They're focusing on their career.
I'm curious, like in your immediate circle, how many of them have kids?
Oh, none.
Luckily, like all my family are just like, they know I'm going for my goals and they're not pressuring me, which is great. But I know some people get pressured.
I feel like women are kind of seen as like, that's your job, that's your responsibility. But I think a lot of times people forget that like our responsibility is just to kind of enjoy the life that we're living.
For generations, adult femininity was most correlated with having children, and not having any was putting your individual needs above the country's. Even the Pope recently criticized couples that were having pets over children in response to the declining global birth rates.
E tante coppie non hanno dei figli perché non vogliono, ma hanno due cani, due gatti, si toglie umanità.
And so it's evident that both men and women now have different realities, priorities, and access. But is this what's contributing towards population collapse in many countries like America? Because for some countries, is it already too late?
Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has warned that the declining birth rate is putting the future of the country at risk.
Japan has been facing low birth rates and an aging population for several decades now, where in the past year, the number of deaths in the country has reached twice the number of births.
People have many competing priorities to weigh children against.
The Prime Minister has even issued a warning that Japan is on the brink of not being able to maintain social functions, and that the country cannot wait any longer to solve problems. And it's not just Japan.
South Korea is facing a population crisis.
Italy's decreasing population is the most pressing issue that needs to be addressed.
Many developed countries are even providing financial incentives for couples to have more children. It's to a point where even China, the world's most populated country, is now experiencing population decline caused by the impact of their one-child policy that was implemented to control overpopulation.
China did have a one-child policy, but about 10 years ago they changed it to a two-child policy. Then a few years ago they changed it to a three-child policy. China's birth rate right now is 40% below replacement.
And with the economic impact that could result if low birth rates continue in these large economies, it becomes apparent why even traditionally isolationist countries like Japan are considering opening up their borders. And so I wanted to ask a Brazilian immigrant in America about immigration. People point to immigration as a solution when societies are having less kids. But do you think that also leads to further societal issues? Do you think that it brings more of a benefit or more of a detriment?
I think it brings both. Once they bring a lot of people from all over the world, they will need to reorganize themselves and respect their own laws and their own culture. But in a certain point, I do believe that immigration could be the problem to solve, and also family planning. It's crazy still that you see a family that is poor having 5 kids.
And so then, what's happening in these less developed countries? Underdeveloped countries like Angola and Chad have birth rates as high as 8 per woman in younger populations. But as a country gets richer, birth rates decline. Nigeria is a prime example. As their economy grew to the largest in Africa, its birth rates decreased. Not only does a growing economy change access to education and family planning, but also affords opportunities to shift attitudes towards marriage and family. And so there's a tricky balance between having enough money to have kids and a general decline in desire to have kids as wealth increases. What does this tell us about society and what?
I think, like I said this in the birth gap live stream, like I think I don't know, from what I've seen, the progressive reaction to this seems to be just not acknowledge that. So let's say, assume that declining birth rates is an issue, right? It's going to cause some problems, like societal problems, right? Let's just assume that. And to be honest, it's a sensible assumption. Like it will cause some. Not everything, not something you see maybe even as morally good is going to have no negative unintended consequences, right? So there's going to be some issues from this. What I've seen from the sort of progressive side is just no recognition of the problem. I've not seen any progressive commentary on this topic. The conservative reaction that I've seen has been to basically like whine about it. And I don't think that's helpful either. I think this is something that we are seeing in pretty much every country as they develop. So it's clearly something that is universal across culture. Culture does lead to certain buffers, but generally this is just something that we see as countries develop, as people's standards of living increase. So to me, it doesn't make sense to try and hold back the water because the dam is going to burst whatever you do. It seems to me like we have to change our economic system so that it can work with this, because the more energy we put into fighting it, the more of an opportunity cost there may be to embracing it and trying to work with it. Yeah, it's kind of the different. It's kind of like the difference between like being dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century and walking into the 21st century with open arms, right? I just don't. Even if you recognize that there will be severe hurdles to overcome as birth rates decline, I just don't see the value in whining about it. I think it's just something you've got to be like, right, this is going to happen. We have not found a solution to it. All of the things that we found that people have tried to implement to increase birth rates have not been working to any significant degree. So we're going to have to work with this. You've got to work with the flow of water or the current or whatever the term is. But yeah, that's my opinion.
We truly value. Because when we look at these trends, what does it say about our priorities? Often it's only in hindsight when we can realize what we truly value. Do you think you'll regret it if you never had kids?
I think a lot of times people have more feelings of like, I wish I would have waited. Maybe I would have like thought things through more before having children, versus people who don't have them. I feel like they less of the time like regret not having.
No, because honestly, in the past I've thought about it. Like, and I also have a brother, talking to him about stuff, and we're just like, I think that it would be okay if we did not. You know what I mean? I feel like the world would be okay.
Yeah, I think it's something that naturally I'd want if I had more time. If I could still have kids at like 60, 70, which maybe you might. I mean, there's probably women out there. In general, I'm just thinking I'm probably gonna time out.
Would you be really sad if you didn't have kids?
Yes, I feel like I would. As like a nanny, I feel like I've been around them for so long, so if I didn't have them, I would be kind of a little bit upset.
I'm kind of just hoping that I won't regret it, but I could also see how maybe when I become older, like not having someone that's forced to take care of me.
Right. I mean, because we changed a lot, right? I'm guessing.
First of all, like someone who's forced to take care of you, insanely selfish reason to have someone, but also the data I've seen is that only 1 to 2% of offspring actually do significantly look after their parents in some way once they get to old age. So yeah, good luck betting on that horse.
You, when you started college, is a lot different than you are who you are today, right?
Totally, yes.
Because I've also seen how my desire for wanting kids have changed as I've entered my mid-20s. Because for a long time, I didn't want kids. And call it getting older, but the biggest shift was how I started to view relationships. The Harvard study of adult development is the longest running study on happiness. And since 1938, it has tracked 268 initial participants and even their children's lives and well-being to see what made people happy. And what the study consistently found was that it wasn't money or status or the shiny car, but strong relationships with family, friends, and romantic partners that was crucial not only for happiness, but for health and even resiliency.
Good relationships keep us happier and healthier.
So it made me think, does Western society's emphasis on individualism and personal achievement actually make us happier? Or is the neglect of the family unit and values and disregard for others exactly what's making our lives more challenging? Do you think like having kids is a key to having like a fulfilled life?
Well, having kids is very, very good. I love my kids. I love having kids. The first baby, when I was 18 years old, was a very difficult parenthood. You can imagine how a kid going to college experiencing a life of paternity. And so we went through.
Like for me, I think it's key to happiness. Like I said, they're gonna be a little fun, you know? They're gonna be annoying, of course, they're kids. I know I was annoying.
I was annoying too.
I don't think it's for everyone. It's a hard job, and so for some people, yes. But for some people, absolutely not.
Do you regret not having more kids?
No, had a perfect 2 girls, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what we often fail to see is that the solution is in the nuance. Just like the example of overpopulation versus the risk of collapse, it's only when we finally recognize the negative consequences of prioritizing one side over the other is when we can finally understand that 2 opposing things can coexist. And just like how I used to think that having a family would detract from my lifelong goals like building a media company, I now realize that it can actually be my biggest motivator.
Hey, Loha. Or Lora.
To achieve that and even more. And it's when we decide to fearlessly navigate through the nuances of life to find what truly matters to us. That's what I call exploring the unfamiliar. And with that, thanks for watching, and like, comment, and subscribe if you want to.
Boom. So that's that one. So it was interesting. I mean, I can't remember from the other videos I've watched of his if he usually gives an opinion, but yeah, I guess he didn't give an opinion at the end of that one, which was yeah, I was looking forward to hearing like what he thought about it after watching all those videos. But yeah, I don't know what more else I can say on that topic, to be honest. Like, I just think, oh, why is that cut off? That's odd that that's been cut off. Let me just rearrange this. Okay. And let me move me back as well. But yeah, I'm not sure what else I can really say about that, to be honest. I think like birth rates do decline when a country becomes more economically developed and socially liberal, which is the way that they seem to all be heading, especially economically developed. And that is just something that happens. You can moan about it if you want, but if it's an issue, you got to work with it rather than against it, in my view. So we'll see how it turns out. You know, a lot of the people in this chat, I would presume, are relatively young, in their 20s and 30s. And if we live to our expected life expectancy, or if we live to our life expectancy, we will see these things work out, or play out, should I say. Cool. So this next one is Schopenhauer, Why Having Children is Wrong, Antinatalism. So this one is focusing on a specific philosopher, Schopenhauer. So let's see what this video is chatting.
If children were brought into the world by an act of pure reason alone, would the human race continue to exist? Would not man rather have so much sympathy with the coming generation as to spare it the burden of existence, or at any rate not take it upon himself to impose that burden upon it in cold blood? Antinatalism is the philosophical belief that assigns...
Okay, I'm just going to speed it up a tad because this guy speaks annoyingly slowly.
...a negative value to birth. Antinatalists believe that having children is morally wrong and that one shouldn't do it. There are a variety of possible ethical arguments to make, but the general tone of the antinatalist position is that existence itself has a negative value. In other words, that it's better to not exist at all. If non-existence is preferable to existence, then it follows that it's morally wrong to create a new life and doom another being to a life of suffering. This video is not about antinatalism in general. Rather, we're taking a look at Schopenhauer's position on this question. There seems to be a great misconception regarding Schopenhauer's views on procreation. There is this idea that Schopenhauer was not a complete antinatalist. One philosophy magazine, for example, called Schopenhauer a proto-antinatalist. While it's definitely true that Schopenhauer directly influenced those philosophers who are now most famously associated with antinatalism today, such as Émile Cioran, in this video we want to argue that there is nothing half-baked about Schopenhauer's antinatalism. In other words, we want to argue that Schopenhauer was a full-fledged antinatalist, even if the term did not exist at that time.
Oh, and one thing I will say is, I actually only realized now, but the music in the background in the last video we reacted to may result in this stream being demonetized. And the video that I've got coming out on Wednesday also may be demonetized because there is a clip I use in it, which is, I think, fair use, and I've disputed it, but YouTube is saying it's copyright. It doesn't fall under fair use. So we'll see how the dispute plays out. But yeah, it's looking like both of them may be demonetized. So if anyone would like to help me cover the costs of putting all this stuff together, there is a link in the pinned message that you can go into and put and send in a donation. You can also leave a little message on your donation. Fucking hell, sorry, I'm just trying to get the link so that I can put it in the chat, but it's not working. Let me just, I'll play the video and then I'll put it in the chat. But if anyone wants to send anything in there, then it will be greatly appreciated. So that I can, so that it helps me cover the costs.
There are two main components to antinatalism. First, the belief that existence has a negative value, and two, the conviction that having children is morally wrong. Where Schopenhauer is concerned, everyone is in agreement that he adheres to the first belief, that existence has a negative value. It is the basis for his philosophical pessimism. The point of contention is whether or not he believed in the second idea, the ethical conviction that having children is wrong. The reason why there is considerable doubt on this point is that Schopenhauer never explicitly writes that it's wrong to have children. Plus, there is the biographical fact that Schopenhauer himself, at one point in his life, expressed his desire to have children and a family. However, we want to make the case that Schopenhauer also believed that having children is morally wrong, and therefore that he fits the definition of an antinatalist.
Yeah, and also expressing the desire to have a family and have children is not necessarily counter to antinatalism. Like, you can want something and still recognize it to be ethically wrong, or he may have been talking about adopting. I don't know. I don't know the specific passage they're talking about, but yeah, just point that out.
In order to do so, we have to read between the lines a little bit. First argument, the origin of suffering. We recommend you watch our series on Schopenhauer's main work, The World as Will and Representation. We go in much more detail there. But for the purposes of this video, we need to quickly go over why the world is such a hell, according to Schopenhauer. Recall how the world appears to us both as will and representation. Recall also how the will is undifferentiated in time and space, meaning there is no multiplicity in the will. This tension between the fundamental unity of the will versus the inevitable multiplicity of representation is the cause of all suffering in the world. Through the principium individuationis, we are fooled into thinking we are different instead of the same, that there is a you versus me, this versus that, here versus there. Therefore, with the same necessity with which the stone falls to the earth, the hungry wolf buries its fangs in the flesh of its prey, without the possibility of the knowledge that it is itself the destroyed as well as the destroyer. If we consider the consequences of this worldview, we must come to the conclusion that for Schopenhauer, having children is a great evil. Why? Because by creating a new life, we create yet more division in the fundamental unity of the will. We directly contribute to the suffering of the world. We create new life, a new subject, and so, in a way, we create a new object. We introduce a new element, a new breaking point. We expedite the process by which the fundamental unity of the will becomes disturbed. We become accomplices in the suffering of the world. What can we do against this great evil? Not have children. Second argument, asceticism. The previous metaphysical musings and their consequences are actually a good enough argument to make our case, but we have yet another argument to consider. Namely, that Schopenhauer recommends sexual abstinence as part of his ethical call for asceticism. Voluntary and complete chastity is the first step in asceticism or the denial of the will to live. Obviously, this precludes the possibility of having children. Of course, we should remember, and here some confusion may arise, that Schopenhauer advocated an ascetic lifestyle while also recognizing the reality of the world, that it's way too difficult for the average person to live in intentional poverty, to take long fasts, to become completely chaste, etc. For the vast majority of people, Schopenhauer advocated an ethics based on compassion. But in Schopenhauer's ideal world, we would all be saints and sages. Just because he realized this ideal is too hard for the majority to attain, doesn't mean he doesn't recommend it. He is making a practical consideration, not an ethical one. More people are familiar with Schopenhauer's essays than they are with his philosophy proper. Maybe that's why this aspect of his philosophy is often forgotten. His essays don't deal with asceticism in any kind of depth, at least not as much as his main philosophy does. Perhaps that is why the myth persists that Schopenhauer, while assigning a negative value to existence, does not explicitly condemn procreation. Hopefully this video can clear that.
I gotta be honest, I did not really pick up on anything there to comment on. But the next video should be good. So the next video...
Immigration!
Next video is Doug Stanhope. It's a stand-up piece by Doug Stanhope, which I hadn't come across before, which is called Stanhope on Babies and Abortion. And I haven't seen this one before. I know there is a specific clip where he talks about the ethics of procreation, but I haven't seen this one. So I thought it would be decent to watch. So yeah, let's dive in. I haven't seen this one.
I don't have a... There's too many people in this fucking country. But I think if you're going to focus on keeping people out, you're going to focus on the people who don't contribute to society. That's a no-brainer. And there's a specific group of over 4 million people that come into this country every year and don't contribute a fucking thing. And everyone knows who I'm talking about, but no one wants to say it because it's politically incorrect. But fuck that. You know who I'm talking about? Officer Bob. You know who I'm talking about? Who am I talking? Babies. That's who I'm talking about. Babies. They come out of your hole. They come into this country. They don't speak the language. They don't want to work. They just take and they cause a ruckus and they waste all of our natural resources. I say put the Border Patrol agent at the foot of your uterus. Anything that comes out without a visa, you kick it back in the hole.
It's quite funny because it's like it's a take on... I guess he's poking fun. I mean, one, I think he's making a point, but he's also, I think, poking fun at conservative narratives around immigration, obviously, which is quite clever. Yeah, this is quite funny.
What's your name? You're not on the list. Get back behind the velvet rope. The club is over full. We'll call you when we need you. Sick the amount of people. Oh, Doug, don't you do an anti-baby bit on every CD? Yes, because you won't stop having them, so I'm going to keep saying it. Almost every problem in the world boils down to too many fucking people. And I'm not just talking out of my eye. I had my vasectomy. I have no children.
Oh, I didn't know he had a vasectomy. What a lad.
Anyone else had a vasectomy? Who did? Did you? Good. Well, get him a drink. That's a true American hero right there. Don't name...
That's so funny. That would be quite cool to have on a t-shirt, wouldn't it? I'm a true American, like, I got a vasectomy, I'm a true American hero, or something like that.
Fucking Memorial Highway after him after he gets thing. After that guy. Every time you get a good parking space, there you go. There you go. Remember that guy. He's the guy who didn't have someone parking there. Every time you're fucking stuck in traffic, yeah, you think about the breeders when you, hey, no traffic at all today. Thank you. How long before you blew a nut after you had it? You remember?
10 minutes.
2 weeks? Yeah, I went 8 days. 2 weeks at 8 days. Because they tell you wait 72 hours. And I developed what they call granuloma. If you don't know how they do a vasectomy, what they do is they go in and they make a small incision on each side of your scrot sac, and then they go in with the tweezer things and they remove your courage and your confidence and your social skills and your sense of humor and your need for any personal hygiene. And
it would be interesting to like know which one he did because or which one he got, because there's like different technologies now, so you can get like no scalpel ones, which obviously there's something of an incision, but I'm not sure it's actually called an incision because it's like really small. It's like a pin prick sort of.
they replace it with a violent fear of sneezing. So I had that done out of respect for the world. And then they're telling me, and then I get granulomas, is where you continue to leak semen in your bag sack, and then your bag sack starts swelling up bigger and bigger every day. Did you get that? No, it's fucking. I have pictures of it on my website because people thought I was exaggerating. It was like I called it the Hinden bag. It was like a hippity hop in between my legs. It was like the Blueberry Kid from Willy Wonka. And they're telling me wait 72 hours. I go, what kind of superheroes jacking off with this going on 6 days in?
There's actually like some people who not from vasectomy, like some people just get it as a medical condition where like their testicles get so big they have to carry it around in wheelbarrows. That's crazy. Then they get them surgically removed, but like that's mad. But like, yeah, he's not talking about that. It's like
I waited 8 days, and I didn't even.
And Jay, you saying I should interview Doug Stanhope? Like maybe one day. I don't know. Like I think he's maybe a bit too big, like out of my league at the moment, but we'll see.
I want to jack off then, but you go 8 days without. I've never gone 8 days in my natural load-blowing life without emptying off. But weird shit happens in your head after that amount of time. I'm getting deviant thought watching TV commercials that don't even have people in them. I could do something. I jacked off with my eyes closed and 2 fingers is squinting like a little girl in a horror movie. Yeah. I don't want to see what's coming out of there, blood or stitches or chili. I didn't think I needed a vasectomy. I was like some convenient frame of mind because I've dumped irresponsible nuts for my whole life and never came up unlucky, right, with the baby. So I figured with all the shit I've done to my body, I was surprised I had sperm that was still white, much less potent. Exactly. So and then I knocked on my wife a year and a half ago. It was the first abortion. It was the only abortion I've had, but it might have been the longest abortion of all time. It took a month to have. Has anyone had an abortion? You're all wrapped with attention now all of a sudden. So I assume you all have. It's a fucking horrible thing to go through. And not horrible in that, oh, it's a living thing. What are we doing? Fuck the living thing. A genital wart is a living thing. If it's going to irritate you for life, burn it off, right? Get the fuck. Bladder cancer is alive and growing like a baby in you. If you try to remove that, I'll protest you and say, stop playing God. It's horrible because we panicked and didn't do any research and because you have options when it comes to abortion now. It's not like 1955 where you just had to kick her down a staircase and hope for the best, right?
I wonder where this was from. Let's just see the DVD Deadbeat Hero. So it's from one of his specials. Whoa, this was uploaded in 2008. Sorry, that's probably a bit loud actually, whistling into the mic.
You feed her a tapeworm and hope it takes a left at the Y. You have medical options. I was hoping that you had the option of doing it live on a crowded airplane so it might serve as an example to living babies that were already on board and thinking about screaming through the whole flight. A little Scared Straight program for the infants. But can't do that. But we did the RU486 because it sounded easy. Yeah, it sounds like, it's an abortion pill. Hey, what do you want, surgery or a pill? And you go, that sounds like you just take a Flintstone vitamin and you wait for the abortion fairy to come and she leaves a quarter under your womb and no one knows the wiser. But no, it was a long story and I won't get into the graphic details but it took a month to have this. And what was more fucked up is how they treat you. I don't know if it was just this clinic, because we had to go to 2 different ones of the same brand. They were all fucking assholes, and they treated you like shit because they can, and that's a problem. Even though abortion is legal, for a limited time only, get them while they're hot, girls, because John Ashcroft came to town. He knows your body better than you. Trust your government. That blue light special is about to end. But even though it's legal, it still lives in that gray area of shame, where if you even bring it up in a fucking basement drunken comedy club, it creates a church-like bingo hall silence. And that's how they treat you like shit, because they can get away with it. It's like dildos, right? They're legal, except in Mississippi. You're going to jail for that. They're legal. Say you want to go to get a dildo tonight. You go out to the smut shop. You get a nice top shelf blue wiggler, and you bring it home and you jam the batteries in it. But then the neck doesn't swivel quite right for the G spot, and then the little rubber rabbit doesn't quite reach your clitoris like it says it will on the box. What are you gonna do? Bring it back? You had to get half liquored up on drab beer just to walk into that joint, much less stop by Monday morning on the way to your accountant position when you're. How you need to talk to someone? This doesn't reach my clitoris. Is something? Can I try on a different one? They're gonna tell you to pound sand and get out of the store. Who are you gonna call? The Better Business Bureau? I have parental rights, and I was denied them. It's the same with an abortion. They know they can be as. They know I'm not going to walk into a crowded clinic with my wife and slap my hand down on the formica. This is the worst abortion I have ever had. I want to see your manager. I want to talk to your manager. You call this an abortion? I would be embarrassed to put out this kind of workmanship, my friend.
If I actually think it would be kind of cool for someone to do like an actual antinatalist stand-up set. So I don't know if anyone watching has like a comedic streak, but if anyone feels like doing that, I feel like do it, record it, put it online. Like it could be if you do it well, it could be popular.
I'm going to tell my friends about this. Yes, I am. I'm not going to have my abortions here anymore. You have lost a very valuable customer today, my friend. I am cutting up my Priority Club membership card. Oh, you're going to fucking stare at me like you don't have any... Yeah, fine. Before you actually go and get all quiet and pissy like I'm some asshole about this, keep in mind, I'm just telling you the parts that I think are funny. You don't know the reason we had an abortion was it wasn't frivolous. We didn't have an abortion because we weren't ready to take care of a child and we're irresponsible, or because we're not financially capable of taking it. The reason we had it is because I really wanted to see what it felt like to kill a baby. I just didn't want you to judge.
Right, that is the end of that one. So this one, next in the playlist, was submitted via the form. I believe I know who submitted it via the form. But anyway, so this one is called Why I Don't Care If I'm an Antinatalist, brackets ineffectual whining. So we'll see what this guy has to say. I think I saw this video a while ago, but I believe it's like a guy talking about well, let's just see, actually, because I can't remember the details.
Giving this antinatalism thing some thought, and I reckon I've got a lot of problems with it, or at least the way it's been presented, and certainly the scene that sprung up around it. As far as the idea is concerned, it's fine. I agree with the basic premise more than disagree. But it's never mattered to me if anyone else agreed with it or not. I was never going to have kids anyway, but that's not the point, because a lot...
So it's quite quiet, this video, so hopefully you guys can hear it.
Antinatalists do have kids. The way I always expressed it to other people was not, it is always a harm coming into being, since even though I would agree with that, the definition of harm varies widely for other people, and since there's no central authoritative agreement on how much harm is tolerable in existence, it's just opinion versus opinion. So, interesting enough as an academic argument, but nothing that can ever be resolved.
I don't think it's necessarily opinion versus opinion. I mean, at the end of the day, I do think it boils down to that, but I think any ethical issue boils down to that, so it's not independent of antinatalism. Like, the thing that it eventually boils down to is like what your values are. And I've had, hundreds of conversations about antinatalism, and sometimes it just boils down to the fact that you have different values, just fundamentally different values. And you can question the person's values all you like, but at the end of the day, if those are their values, those are the values that they're going to, that they're going to judge, they're going to live in accordance with. But one thing you can do, because it doesn't just boil down to, oh, you have your opinion, I have mine, is like many people do actually share the same values. And what you can do is find similar situations to the act of procreation and ask people their opinion of those and how their values sort of reflect, how they reflect on those given their values, and then say, well, surely to be consistent, you should think this about procreation then. So yeah, I don't think it's just a matter of opinion, but it does come down to your basic values at the end of the day.
And I certainly wouldn't go, it is wrong to have children, because high-handed moral claims like that are just bullshit. I mean, who the hell would I be to say that to other people? Obviously, it's another claim that can never be resolved, and I'm not into pushing shit uphill for the sake of scoring points. I would always say, I don't think it's a good idea to have children, and mainly for the reasons of climate change, because climate change means that the world for us is materially bad now and getting worse, without anything to prevent it. I know that there's been people who have in fact decided not to have kids because of climate change, without giving any indication they've read Benatar or whoever. So,
yeah, I think it's a perfectly valid reason, the climate change one, but I don't know why someone who is like ethically minded would specifically focus on climate change. Like it's just one of the many harms and causes of suffering that are out there or looming. You have many others like threat of nuclear war, threat of future pandemics, AI, like increasing population, which may, resource scarcity and wars and migration due to that. Loads of different things. So I find it hard to understand why people specifically focus on climate change, but if they do, it's not particularly an issue if that is the door that they use to understand procreative ethics, because if the first point of contact you make with procreative ethics is climate change, that's completely fine, obviously, and it will be the first point of contact for many people. But if your understanding of procreative ethics is limited to climate change, that's the thing that seems very odd to me. Yeah, anyway, sorry, some people are saying in the chat, so I'll just catch up. So Shatom is in the chat. Hey, Shatom. I think you only just came in. And Phil Rabrat as well, if I'm saying your name right. And Trium says, on a fundamental level, we all share the same values, pain and pleasure. Yes, I get what you mean, but let me give an example of how it can differ, right? So I have had many conversations with people where you both value, pain and pleasure, suffering and well-being, or, the goods and bads, or however you want to put it. But you value them in slightly different ways. And one way that's super relevant to antinatalism is the value of well-being itself, or well-being as it serves people, right? So there's this thing called Narvison's dictum, which I'm going to make a video about, but it's basically the difference between making people happy and making happy people. So, for example, I'm part of a debate club, and we had a debate the other day, and it wasn't on antinatalism, but the topic of antinatalism comes up a lot in this debate group. And I was speaking with a guy, and we were drilling down on this issue of Narvison's dictum, and we basically just ended up having completely different values, which maybe you could drill down a bit further, but I couldn't see any way to drill down further than this. But basically, what we got to is the fact that I see no reason to create happy people, because there is no one to exist before you create them to want to come into existence for the things that you would say make a happy life, right? So for me, it makes sense to make existing people happy, make people happy, right? But making happy people, that doesn't make sense to me. He, on the other hand, it makes sense to him to create people in the service of increasing well-being in the universe, which doesn't make sense to me. So he also agrees that we should make people happy, but he agrees. He thinks that it also makes sense to make happy people. So if you are guaranteed to make someone who's going to have an amazing life, he thinks that you should be actively creating them, which to me makes absolutely no sense. But it just seemed like a fundamental difference in our values. So that's what I mean. Omar has just entered the chat as well, and is talking about 80,000 hours, which, for anyone that doesn't know, it's basically the careers service for effective altruism, and it's definitely worth a look. Definitely, I would recommend if any of you are looking for a changing career or you're starting a career, definitely have a look on 80,000 hours. Even if you don't end up finding a job on there, there's a lot of useful information. Yeah, Amar was just putting some more information in there about that. And hey, John H as well has entered the chat. Cool. And you guys are talking about Dexter. I haven't seen it, but I will not get involved. I'll continue with the video.
Seems to me the best argument to make if one was inclined to make an argument. All that usual existential stuff works for intellectuals, which is fine, but it makes little impact on people in general unless they are already going to agree with something like that.
I don't think and I don't know if he was implying this, but I don't know the only two options are just the existential stuff that only like smart people will be able to wrap their head around, or climate change. Like, there are other there are more fundamental things to antinatalism than climate change that the average person can get their head around, like the risk argument, the consent argument. These are very easy things for people to recognize. So, for example, if you were to talk to the average person about the consent argument, you could simply just say, I would assume that you agree that if we can, if a prospective couple runs a genetic test and they find out they're going to pass on some sort of hereditary disease to an infant that is going to be just horrible, we should, clearly not be doing that, right? We should not be imposing that suffering on that child without their consent. And I think most, the average person will understand that, and they will presumably say, I agree with you. Well, then the easiest way to get to antinatalism from there is to say, okay, we agree on that, but we agree on that because you're imposing suffering on someone without their consent. Why do we just reserve that for people with genetic diseases? Doesn't everyone suffer? Like, when you make anyone, you impose a level of suffering on them without their consent. Now, I think that's something very simple that the average person can understand, and you can elaborate on it further, detailing some of the harms and sufferings in life and the guarantee of death that the person may not have considered before. So, yeah, I think there's more to speak to the average person about than climate change. But yeah, anyway, let's continue.
For the most part, though, I'm indifferent to reproduction, whether people do it or not. It's got nothing to do with me, and I have no influence over it, so taking a strong moral position on something like that just strikes me as pointless. I don't push shit uphill, and I don't have a lot of respect for people who do, especially for fringe weirdo ideas like antinatalism, Which is what it is, by the way. I don't think a lot of antinatalists in their respective echo chambers realise just how strange it is. They all act as if it's the most apparent concept in the world. That's what happens when you lose touch with other people. So
I do agree with him here that a lot of people will be in echo chambers. I mean, I don't think this is a unique criticism to antinatalism. I mean, this literally happened with pretty much any group, right? Especially around ethics, you know. People find a community they connect with on a fundamental ethical issue, and sometimes get so deep in that community that they kind of lose contact with the rest of the outside world, which I wouldn't recommend for anyone to do, antinatalist or not. So I agree with him there. Yeah, anyway, let's continue.
I don't know if that makes me an antinatalist in the eyes of other antinatalists or not, but it's nothing to argue over. I just believe what I do, and it's that. Easy peasy. But even so, the way the antinatalist scene is coming across is just getting weird right now. It stands to reason that the shriller types, the zealous converts who've taken antinatalism and turned it into an ideology and a performative identity, would be the most vocal, while the quietists very obviously just stay quiet about it. So antinatalism is being presented as a club you join, with rules you follow, things you say and don't say, and all the usual myopic nonsense clubs insist on.
Again, I think that's true of any ethical community. Every community has this. Even the communities that pride themselves on welcoming, what do you call it? Disagreement and stuff, have that. So, for example, take the effective altruism community. Like, it tried to build itself to be skeptical of itself and welcome criticism and dissent, but time and time again, still people talk about how they don't feel like they can say certain things in that community. Like, there's certain types of dogma. This will also be true in the antinatalist community. It'll be true in any community. And yeah, I don't think it's a good thing. I agree with him there. Like, it's a valid observation, but like, it's not unique to antinatalism. And yeah, I think, you know, whilst it's true, I also think, like, it seems to me to be getting better. Like, there are many people out there that are a bit cuckoo, right, in the antinatalist community. Some of them have public platforms as well, or somewhat public platforms. And, you know, people will think about that what they will. It's unfortunate, in my view. Some people, you know, will not be the best representatives. Other will be better representatives. Each of us will have a different opinion about who fits those criteria and who doesn't. But if the people in the antinatalist community who feel like they can make a good case for antinatalism, and they can withstand putting their opinions in public, and they do feel like they have contact with the outside world and with reality, you know, they don't just spend all of their time online. They do have a life outside of antinatalism and outside of the internet, all of these sorts of things. They're a generally balanced around and well-rounded person. And you've got to be honest with yourself when you assess whether you are that person or not. They're the ideal candidates to start putting stuff out about this publicly, you know? And yeah, if you think that the majority of people who advocate for antinatalism at the moment aren't like that, that is not a reason to give up. If anything, if you consider yourself, like this guy, a more down-to-earth, reasonable person who can present antinatalism in a coherent and accessible way, like I think he was implying he could earlier, surely that's more of a case to be doing it publicly. I mean, not that I think he has an obligation or anyone does. Like, you know, at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want, and they're welcome to that. But it just seems strange to put that forward as a reason not to be engaging in advocacy. But maybe I've misunderstood what he said. But yeah. Sorry. No, I just had another scare. I thought the stream had gone down again, but it's not. It's all good. Cool. Okay, let's continue.
And one of the main rules seems to be that antinatalism must not only be believed, it must be said to be believed. That is, take it to the streets and to the socials and make a big deal out of it. I shouldn't be too critical of that because I went through a stage like that when I was in my 20s as well. But it's precisely because of that that I don't want to go through that kind of thing again. It's exhausting, often frustrating, and most importantly fruitless because outside of convincing someone to join the club, antinatalism cannot achieve nothing in the world for us. I mean, what constitutes a goal for antinatalism? Getting someone to agree not to have kids, right? And how often does that happen? Do Stop Having Kids keep a record of the number of people they convert? Do any other antinatalists who claim to be activists? What's the success rate? Where do we find such statistics? I'd have thought that something like that would be pretty important to people.
John is asked, so there's a lot of stuff going on in the chat. I haven't really kept up with all of it, but John's asking who this guy is. The YouTube account is Andrew, well, let me just get it up on screen. Andrew McIntosh. I think that's how you'd say it.
People who say that they're out to stop other people breeding.
And yeah, I think what this guy's saying at the moment about like measuring stuff and stuff, I mean, it's coming off to me as like it's kind of easy to be a cynic kind of thing. Like, I think obviously if you are engaging in a form of advocacy and you can measure the impact of what you're doing, you should, because, then who doesn't want to be more effective in what you're doing? The thing with this sort of thing is that it's hard to measure. So one example of something that's actually easier to measure but still failed when it came to this is there's an animal rights group called Anonymous for the Voiceless, and they do street outreach events, and they used to, as a matter of policy, tally up how many people you strongly thought would go vegan as a or strongly consider becoming vegan as a result of conversations you had with them in that demonstration. They ended up binning off that policy because they thought, actually, it's probably not particularly accurate. There are so many factors that can skew that. So if you are in a better mood that day, you can perceive the conversations you've had as being more impactful as they were on your end. But on the other person's end, like the person you're speaking to, it's very easy for them to agree with you in the moment and get swept up in the moment. And then as soon as they go home, they lose the energy and they're like, I don't really care actually much about that conversation I had. But in the moment, it could have been going really well. So it's like, Stop Having Kids could counter tally, but I don't think it wouldn't really do anything. Like, they've clearly had somewhat of an impact. They've spoken to people, they've had the billboards, they've got media attention. Is it the perfect thing that we could be doing? I don't know. I think this is a reason why we need to be trying to find ways or better ways to measure the impact of what we're doing, or figure out what are going to be effective forms of activism. Like, it's easy, again, like I said, it's easy to be a cynic. You can be a cynic about anything. It's good to raise these questions like he's raising about effectiveness, but it seems to me like he's doing it in a relatively cynical way, which I don't think is that helpful. But yeah, I think advocacy is definitely a worthwhile thing to do. And you're not going to be able to do an effective form of advocacy by doing nothing. You have to start somewhere, even if it's in an ineffective form, as I think he's suggesting. You have to start somewhere. You need to build some foundations to build upon. You can't just say, I can't think of an effective form of advocacy to do now, so I'm going to do nothing, if you get what I mean.
Some antinatalists like to say stuff like, if I prevent one person from breeding, I've saved their children from suffering and their grandchildren and so on, so I've saved hundreds of people from suffering. But they haven't, because if someone doesn't exist, there is no someone to speak of.
Yeah, they haven't saved anyone. It's like how people say, people make the same critique with veganism. It's like, oh, you're not saving animals because they were never brought into existence. Well, okay, it's just semantics. Like, spared is a better word, right? Like, we've spared those children, right? Or we've spared the animals from coming into a farm. So, yeah, just substituting the word spared.
Suffering only happens to actual existing beings. If someone decides not to have kids, they haven't spared those kids any suffering because there are no kids to suffer or not.
Yeah, they haven't spared those specific children, but they've spared new individuals spared new individuals that would have come into existence in the first place, if you get what I mean.
Zero-sum game. But of course, the real goal isn't to stop people reproducing, but to identify as an antinatalist and to be identified as others as an antinatalist, just like every other performative identity that gets invented every half hour these days. It's all about being in the in crowd, because when people take a moral position, they want to feel that their morals are absolute. But you can only do that with other people who have the same moral position. Thereby you can all get together and keep convincing each other just how right you are until everyone agrees that it is only the in crowd that has any right position and everyone else is wrong and therefore evil. It's a secular religion. And a lot of antinatalists do seem to express themselves in very religious terms. In fact, there's outright religious types in antinatalism connecting antinatalism to their beliefs. I'm all for people having their little cosmic delusions, but as far as antinatalism is concerned, it's just another thing I want to keep away from. But the worst aspect is the us versus them narrative. That is very prevalent. People constantly posting on...
Again, I'm kind of getting it's easy to be a cynic vibes. Like, he's pointing out problems, and let's assume all the things he's identifying are accurate, right? It's good to point out problems, but what's even better is coming up with solutions or potential solutions that can be discussed, which haven't appeared yet in this video, but there's still a bit left. There's still like a minute and a half left, so let's see.
The socials articles about disabled people having kids, or people having disabled kids, or just people having kids, and the constant derogation of anyone demonstrating the temerity to reproduce. Terms like breeders, natalists, as if anyone ever calls himself that, are just blurts of bigotry that I well want to keep the hell away from. And let's be honest.
Also, just hey, Mountain Accident and Nice Glass as well. Welcome to the chat.
An idea like antinatalism is more likely to attract people with emotional and mental issues because of how weird and negative it is. I am all for...
That is true as well. Like, fringe things tend to attract people who are a bit quirky, should we say. Like, obviously, every community is going to have their quirky people, but I feel like the more fringe an idea, or the more strange an idea is seen as, it will attract more like strange people. So that is true. I kind of feel like that's neither here nor there. Like, well, no, it is here or there. It is something we should recognize. Like, the composition of a community is important, and if antinatalism just naturally attracts people who are a bit more quirkier, should we say, then obviously that needs to be something that we take into account in how our spaces are, and our advocacy, yeah, I agree with him there. It's like it's something to take note of.
Weirdness and negativity in aesthetic expressions where it belongs, but not as some kind of real world cause to rally to, because you end up with weird and negative people, and there's no way anyone can pretend that isn't happening. Jesus Christ, just look at Gary and his gaping followers. If that's going to be the accepted standard for antinatalism, then all the worse for antinatalism. Anyway, in sum, I still like the idea, but if I am an antinatalist, it's in the same way that I'm a materialist or a determinist or a socialist or something. They're ideas I agree with, often very strongly, but I don't carry flags for them because for me they are just ideas to be discussed or not as occasion offers. I see no reason to take anything that I believe in and turn it into a cause. I know from my own experience and the observation of others that spending one's life on a campaign is futile. Some people have to because of their dispositions. Best of luck to them. But I prefer to take the path of least resistance and surrender the high road to the high-minded. I have no desire to change anyone's mind, make anyone agree with me, anything like that. The world's too big, people are too complex, and my life is too insignificant, and I prefer to keep it that way, and definitely at least not pretend that it isn't.
This is an off-the-cuff call.
Oh, sorry, just gone to the next video. So this is the next one we'll be looking at. In terms of the last thing there about like not... And No Injustice Lasts Forever has just joined the chat. Hey, Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's completely with it. It's his prerogative, isn't it? Like, if he doesn't want to advocate for anything or do anything, then it's completely up to him. It's his life, obviously. But I don't think others should be discouraged to. I mean, the world is an awful place, and we need to improve it, right? And there are certain ways that it can be improved by people pursuing their own self-interest, but we also need people to go out of their way and use some of their time and resources to try and intentionally make the world a better place. And I think that's worthwhile for many reasons, homeless charities, animal rights, antinatalism, all sorts of things, helping, I don't know, orphans, blind children, whatever. I think these are all good, worthwhile things to go around and try and have an impact with. And I mean, I think he was maybe being a bit dismissive there, because I think if someone had a conversation with him and asked if he thinks it's good to, spend some of your time and resources making the world a better place in, say, let's just say, funding the surgery for blind children to be able to see again, like Fred Hollows, or what's the other blind charity? Fucking hell, I've forgotten what the other one. Helen Keller International. I mean, I don't think he would say that is not worthwhile doing. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but yeah. So I don't think it's not worthwhile going out there and trying to make the world a better place. Cool. J.E. saying he had some good points. Yeah, I agree with. I think he had some valid observations. I did get a general overtone of just it's easy to be a cynic kind of vibe, no real solutions provided. But hey, we all do that sometimes, so you can't really shit on people too much for doing that. Wait, I think people are kind of having a conversation in the chat, so I'm not really seeing anything for me to respond to. Cool. And John's gone to get a coffee, so see you later, John. H. Brecken's in the chat. Hey, Brecken. Brecken's saying, seems the subscriber number noticeably went up. Yeah. I hit 2,000 recently, and then since then it's been increasing even further. So yeah, it's been increasing. The effort has been paying off, more people are seeing it. And even if all of those people are antinatalists, the bigger the channel can get with just an antinatalist base, the more promotion it'll get, so that non-antinatalists will see the stuff, right? So it's still all good if all the people seeing the videos, if all the people seeing the videos at the moment are antinatalist, it's fine, because being able to build somewhat of a base to launch off of later, so that people who haven't heard about it before will then do, is decent. Even if it's a bit of an echo chamber at the moment, which I think it somewhat is. Most of the people commenting on my videos are already antinatalists. I don't think it's an unhealthy echo chamber by any means, but even if it is one, it's a temporary one. Cool. Okay. Let's watch this one. So this one is, if anyone watches it, or if anyone has watched it, The Atheist Experience is... Oh, sorry, we've just had another donation through. I say just 4 minutes ago, I missed it. Yeah, they've just said, hope I'm well, which I am. I hope you're well too. And thanks so much for the donation and the support. It goes to covering all of my costs. And is the stream still going? Can someone just message in the chat, let me know that the stream is still up and you can see and hear me, because I keep on getting things coming up like suggesting that the stream is no longer up. Can anyone just okay, cool. Yeah, thanks, Nice Glass. And Hobo. And JE. Cool, nice one. Yeah, I don't know why I'm getting these weird things happening. But anyway, cool. So yeah, if anyone saw it, it's not, I don't know if it's actually still going, but it's not really popular anymore, I don't think, or not from my understanding. So there was the Atheist Experience, was a community in Austin, Texas, and they ran a call-in atheism show where people could call in and talk about atheism, talk about religion, debate, whatever, and it became really popular. And then it kind of fell, and it's not really popular anymore, I don't think. But I used to watch it when I was a teenager and stuff. Anyway, so now it kind of was, even though it's not that popular anymore, it was kind of used as a launch pad for a few other shows and a few other sort of influencer type people, atheist sort of influencer type people, the most famous being Matt Dillahunty. And one of them, I believe they're linked, is this Truth Wanted show, which I believe was at some point, is an offshoot of Atheist Experience. I might be wrong with that, but anyway, they had a call in and someone called in about antinatalism. So let's have a look at that.
It's a topic I think it's a topic I've talked about before. I'm not sure if Brady has had experience talking about this, but let's see. We got Brant, who's calling in from Wisconsin. Brant.
So this is Brant. I wonder if this is Brant who follows the channel. I haven't seen Brant in the chat yet, but Brant usually does come to the live stream. So Brant, if you're here and this was you calling in, then let us know. And actually, yeah, look, it is affiliated with the Atheist Experience, because the Atheist Experience, you can't see it because my head is covering it, but in the bottom right, they've got a little logo that says ACA, which is the Atheist Community of Austin. And that was the group that ran Atheist Experience. So, yeah, it does look like they are. Oh, no, JE's saying that Brant it goes by Antisocial Ethelist, but I'm talking about Brant Gill, I think is their name they go by, the person who I sometimes see in my comment section and live stream. But I guess there can be more than one Brant. Cool. Let's continue.
What do you want to talk to us about today?
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you all if you think there is such thing as good biological parents, given that it's unnecessary to have a child to live a okay life, and all lives have some type of harms and suffering that's inevitably death, assuming death is a harm.
Yeah, so this is an interesting idea because this kind of relates to antinatalism. And I've talked about antinatalism on this show before. Antinatalism, in short, is sort of this idea that...
Oh, I didn't know they've spoken about this on this show before. I've not seen that clip. If anyone has the clip of, if there is a clip of when they spoke about it on the show before, definitely send it over.
It's actually more moral not to have kids. There's a couple of different popular places where this conversation has showed up. There's even Reddit subreddits called antinatalism, Childfree subreddits, and this has been a growing view in recent years. And it's this idea that, look, climate change is on the horizon, but beyond that, life, there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of unintended harm that could be happening when you bring a kid into this world. So isn't it more ethical to not have kids at all? Now, of course, there's implications to following that line of reasoning, but it's a really interesting argument because I think if you take it very seriously, there's very serious ramifications if the sort of antinatalist assumptions are true, in that there is more suffering than good that comes out of life.
Okay, well, that's not necessarily the assumption. That may be the assumption of some antinatalists, but a life doesn't have to be overwhelmingly suffering for an antinatalist to be against it. The consent argument doesn't assume that. The risk argument doesn't assume that. The axiological asymmetry doesn't assume that. Imposition doesn't assume that. In fact, none of them assume that. Even the quality of life argument The only argument you could say that maybe would assume that is the quality of life one, but I don't think the quality of life one actually does need to assume that, but it gets close to it.
Folks like David Benatar has written about this, and then we talked about was it
Oh, so this guy's familiar with it, like he knows about Benatar and stuff.
not Thomas Pynchon, guy who
Thomas Ligotti, I guess he's going to talk about.
wrote the book we were talking about last week on the show. I've talked about this. So yeah, there's some literature about it, and of course there's a lot of people in popular media right now that are saying like, oh, we should be having more kids, we should be having as many kids as we want, so there's a lot of debate on this topic. Personally, I think there's interesting merits to an antinatalist worldview, but I'm also talking to Brady here, who has a kid, so
Oh, that's interesting. So this guy is maybe kind of sympathetic to antinatalism. It might actually be interesting to get this guy on. I might reach out to this guy because I think he's from like the skeptic sort of sphere. So it might be interesting, like antinatalist versus skeptic sort of thing. What's this guy's? What was this guy's name? He's objectively Dan. Did they have an email here? Ah, here. Okay, cool. I'll take note of that and I'll maybe reach out to them.
Brady, what are your thoughts on this? Have you talked about this topic much?
I was really influenced by the Duggars when we had a kid. We were going to wait for a while, but then we're like, the Lord wants us to multiply. So we had our kid. But no, I think
I wish you were serious about that. Were you actually influenced by the Duggars?
oh yeah. It's
Really?
it's like a fun joke between us because like the church that we came from, they're the type that are just like, hey, pump as many kids as you can because people are questioning the faith and this religion is going to die if you don't have as many kids as possible to indoctrinate. So I definitely think like, here's my thing. I think it is unethical to choose to have -1 or more kids because that means you probably like proactively murdered one of them. You know what
I don't know if he's just made like a really bad joke that I don't get. The other guy's laughing, but yeah, I don't get that. I think he's making a joke about killing kids. I'm not sure.
I'm saying?
Sure.
And I definitely think that there is a cap. I think there is like hey, this is too many and you're not really being responsible or thinking about what if everyone did that. That's like a phrase that I grew up with. But wherever we go to
Sorry, hey, Rainbow's in the chat, and Rainbow's just asked, antinatalism engenders an epistemological conundrum as it endeavors to reconcile the moral imperative of minimizing suffering through non-procreation with the potential obliteration of the hedonistic spectrum. I don't think antinatalism actually does necessarily seek to minimize suffering. I think that is the ethical system it most aligns with, in terms of it just naturally kind of makes most sense to combine it with that. And I think most people in the community do align with minimizing suffering. I definitely align with that. But I don't think you necessarily have to take on an ethical system of wanting to minimize suffering to be antinatalist. You can just think it's wrong to impose suffering on others. But yeah, okay, cool. Okay, I can't see anything else in the chat at the moment.
the point of saying, well, all parents, this, everyone that making decisions that like literally stopping billions and billions and billions and billions years of biological inertia because of like a philosophy that should be applied across the board. It just isn't, to me, it doesn't work that way. That's not how humanity works.
Gotcha. Brant, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I'd like to ask. I mean, I'm an ethicist, so I basically accept all the problems that people say is wrong with antinatalism. I'm just kind of like, those aren't problems to me. But so pro-mortalism, animal suffering, all that stuff, I accept it all. But when it comes down to it, I'd like to ask, I guess, you two, if you think there actually is like some sort of right and wrong in the universe. Like, is there actions that we ought not to do? Like, is there something that's bad or good? Because if there is, I feel like
I that's a different, very, very, very different question.
so able to address the conversation.
Yeah, well, to not to get too deep in the weeds and throwing every single philosophical term out there. But my moral philosophy has definitely changed throughout the years. Probably one of the biggest things that I deconstructed from my Christianity, because I used to just have a very simple idea of, well, whatever God says is right. God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. You know, it was really just that. And then you realize, oh wait, this kind of morality thing is more complicated. Actually, what the hell is morality? It doesn't even exist. And so now I'm in a phase of my life when talking about it, I'm what's called an anti-realist when it comes to morality. In other words, I don't really believe or really subscribe to concepts of objective morality. When I talk about morality, I really think I'm talking about subjective constructs that are usually based on human preferences or preferences to principles like avoidance of suffering. For example, I'm also, of course, attempt to be vegan, try to be it as much as I can, and so I do care about animal suffering, right? That usually doesn't.
Oh my God. I mean, it's better attempting to be vegan than not, obviously, but like, come on, man. You live in America, and you have enough time and stuff to be able to be streaming like this. Like, I don't know. I don't know what his personal life is, but I feel like he doesn't seem like the sort of person who's in a situation where trying to be vegan or being vegan is even hard. Like it's not hard in any way. If you're in a situation that he seems like he's in.
Have anything to do with humans. When we talk about this, we're talking about other sentient beings, but I'm aware that they have a capacity for suffering. I want to try to avoid that suffering as much as possible. So,
but it's definitely good. He's obviously aware of it and stuff.
That's why I make the decisions and choose the products that I do. So in that sense, you can talk about morality in constructive ways. Just because you think that morality is a social construct doesn't mean that it's not quote unquote real, right? Most people agree. Money is a social construct. That doesn't mean it doesn't have real impact, real consequences, real ramifications, because we treat it as real. And that's important enough for me. That's all that really matters to me, is that we do treat it as real. So is morality real in an ultimate objective sense? Not really. If humans didn't exist, or if conscious beings didn't exist that didn't care about themselves either way, I'm not sure if morality would even be a coherent concept. But there are beings that exist that care, and so that's kind of how I view it.
I think
so
it requires
I'm trying to be short about it, but
you have. I think it requires experience to have value. It requires experience to have value for morality to occur. So I agree with that aspect of it. But it seems odd to me to say that like when something's in pain, it's just like simply social construct. Like it's just humans. Like if humans didn't exist, like an animal trapped under a tree, and like the stress seems like it would still be problematic regardless if another being is around to care about it. You know what I mean?
The thing is, I don't disagree. I think the fact that a being is in pain, the subjective experience of it being in pain is an objective fact. I don't disregard that at all. When we say morality is subjective, we're saying the fact that we should care about.
Yeah, I agree with this subjectively, Dan guy. Like at the base of it, morality is subjective, but like you can build pretty objective frameworks off of those subjective values you hold, and people's subjective values tend to be quite similar by and large. Like I said before, they can be different, but like often the differences you can have with people when you get down to the base sometimes actually don't matter that much in reality. Because I've had conversations with people where if we talk in hypotheticals and all philosophical and stuff, then like we really disagree. But when you transport the conversation into real life and you talk about what's going on in the real world, we tend to be on the same page on the vast majority of things. So sometimes people in philosophical discussions can get caught up in sort of like the narcissism of small differences.
That's the difference, right? So I do think we should care first and foremost, and I think most people who take an anti-realist stance also think we should care because we have preferences, because we have values, right? And that's really all we can get to at the end of the day. Otherwise, it's just a big circle. I really think that all these conversations about morality and stuff all just comes to because I have a preference, because I have this value. I don't think that we can get around that.
So if you were interacting with a pure psychopath, how would you be able to explain to them how something's bad under your view? Like you would be kind of trapped into saying like, because in my view, I can be like, hey, you do not want a nail in your eye. I don't want a nail in your eye. And the reason that it's bad to have a nail in your eye is because pain is bad to be experienced. Like objectively for a subjective experience, it's bad.
Yeah.
And your pain is equal to my pain, regardless, because your $5 is equal to my $5. Your pain is equal to my pain, regardless of if you're experiencing it or if I'm experiencing it. So I have like a reason for why like. So for you, it seems to be just kind of like, well, if you think it's bad, I think it's bad, then it's like we're in agreement and kumbaya. But if it's a psychopath or someone who's like completely like from like Islam, and they're just like, yeah, I like tossing gay people off roofs. It's what we do. It makes me feel good, and it's what Allah wants. Then it's just like you can't get through to them. It's just like, what do you do in your view?
I get the frustration that Brunt is talking about there. Like, I do find it frustrating as well that if morality is subjective, someone can always try to appeal to that as a way of justifying what they're doing as completely fine. Like, I agree, it can be frustrating when someone does that. And there can be ways that someone can overcome that within the framework of subjective morals. But what I'd also say is, like, despite how frustrating that is, like, the universe does not exist for things to be ethically simple. Like, it can be the case that like the fact that the fact that someone can do that makes it difficult for you to get them to agree with you is not an argument for the fact that morality is objective. It's more an argument of why you would want it to be objective, because it makes having these discussions easier. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what Brant is saying here, but to me, that's not an argument for why morality is objective.
Yeah, so let me address this.
And to be clear, like, this is something that I'm still, like, trying to navigate. Yeah, I don't really know what I think about whether morality is objective or subjective at the moment, but I lean quite heavily towards subjective at the moment.
I'll answer this quickly, and I want to give Brady a chance to also chime in, because I don't want to take up the whole time. But yeah, so when we're talking about folks who experience psychopathy, and again, just to reiterate, I have no professional medical experience or whatever, right? We are talking about folks who, in general, when they have a diagnosis of psychopathy, tend to struggle with empathy, right? Tend to struggle with valuing other people and their feelings and their desires. And so that, I think, the fact that morality is the way that it is exactly why it is so hard to talk to people who experience psychopathy. Like, that is literally why we have so much trouble with having folks who do break these kinds of social norms and legally enforced norms as well, literal laws, because they don't have that same sense of value. I think our society works because most of us do have that sense of value, and we operate within that. But when you're outside of that construct, if you lack that construct, you just can't do it. So to me, it's kind of like asking, well, how are you going to convince a cat that it's going to experience right and wrong? And not to dehumanize people who experience psychopathy, but it's like, look, an animal is going to experience or have the wants that it wants. You can only do so much to influence that. There's not really much we can do. Human beings are the same way. We're just animals that want what we want. We have these things called society that we work around, but I mean, that's really the only tool or instrument that.
It's kind of frustrating that, like, that it's got derailed onto whether morality is subjective or objective rather than about antinatalism. But
we can use to enforce people outside of wanting.
I don't think it requires free will to. I don't think you need free will. You can be completely programmed. I think all people are completely programmed. Billions of years of evolution, But like, just as like I can't like say a cat is morally responsible for something. I can say that the pain it causes in the universe when it kills a mouse is bad. I don't believe death is bad, but I can say the pain of it having his throat crushed or whatever is a bad thing, and I think that's objectively true. That like all beings on Earth, some common ancestor, and because of that, they experience suffering and pain as a negative experience that ought to be avoided.
I want Brady to chime in. Also, Brady was making faces while I was talking, so I think he disagrees.
Well, I'm just offended by the one-to-one comparison to Cats the Psychopaths. I'm a cat fan, and I just don't know if
well, that's why I want to make the comparison. Let me again make. On a live show, you sometimes come up with stuff on the fly, and it's not great. It's more just, you have to work with where you're at. You got to work with where people are at, and people who experience reality in different ways are going to have that experience. You just have to work with them where they're at, and that's why you treat people with different mental capacities differently. That's it. That's all I was trying to make with that. It was a clumsy analogy, to be fair. So sorry about that. But
as a gay man who has dated other gay men, I kind of get wanting to throw some of them off of a bridge. Just to go back to your previous example.
So now Brady is balancing out my controversial statement with his own controversial statement, which I appreciate. Brady. Really,
You're
welcome. That's good. I appreciate that.
No, actually, honestly, Brain, I really do like the way that you kind of described how your morality works, because I think that for me, coming out of fundamentalism, it was just book says this, God's preferences matter. But then as I got out of that, I realized, oh, my system had to like hit a reset and had to have a new starting point. And my new starting point was similar to what you were saying, was a very like dynamic way of empathy of I don't like this pain, I don't want to give it to others, and then it kind of like sprung off of that and kept going. So like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate that sort of line of thinking, because whenever we have just, oh, do I care about what somebody else is going through, or do I just care what somebody else handed down to me? Not to pick on Roderick for a previous caller from before, but I guess I am a little bit. It's kind of that same concept of he doesn't really care about these kids unless he was prompted. And so a lot of people's morality is that same way, is they really wouldn't care about gay people unless they were prompted by something. It's not about reducing harm. It's not about treating others the way you want to be treated. It's just, oh, this is a stance that I was told to take, so now I'm going to run with it. But you start from a different place, and I think that that's really respectful. I like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go, Brant. Any
Just
final comments before we let you go here?
Yeah, I guess I don't really have much, but I guess anybody that's interested in what I had to say, just check out stophavingkids.org website and aphorism.
All right. Well, Brant, thanks so much for calling in.
So often.
Nice. Cool. That is actually going to be the last one, because we have in 45 minutes got the monthly hangout for the supporter community in the supporter community Discord, where we're all going to hang out and shoot the shit for, a couple of hours or how long, which we do once a month. And I want a little break before then so I can get food and stuff. But if any of you want to come to that hangout like in 45 minutes, then you can join. In the description there's a link to the Patreon. You can join there and then get into the Discord. Or if you want to come to next month's one, then join whenever you like. And you also get free access, early access to videos and exclusive access to other stuff. Yeah, so we're going to end it here because I'm going to have a little break before that. If anyone watching at the moment is coming to that, I will see you in 45 minutes. John's in the chat. John, I'll see you in 45 minutes. And yeah, if anyone wants to come to that, join the supporter community. And yeah, we'll do another one of these. We didn't, by no means did we get through the whole playlist. So we will be doing another one of these. What do you call it? Antinatalist live reacting live streams. So cool, nice one. Thanks everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed the selection of videos. I will be scheduling another one at some point. I'm putting out another form. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all in the next one.